Chapter 6. There's a visitor. But at this time, there was still an unconscious assassin in his bedroom, so it was simply too late to ask anything, and he spoke directly. Someone came to kill me, and now that I knocked him unconscious, he is lying on the floor. The blind teenager slightly sidestepped his head, his heart moved slightly, without a trace of expression on his face. He bowed his head and saluted. What is young Master Fan babbling about? There's no time to play deep here, you always have to mind me. Fan Xian smiled cheekily, thinking, what time is it? You're still pretending to be unrecognizable here. Regardless of that, he pulled the blind teenager's hand and headed in the direction of the other mansion. Young master is still talking nonsense. The blind boy frowned slightly, seemingly puzzled as to why this little child in front of him seemed to know his identities back then. When he had sent the swaddled Fan Xian to Tanyu, Fan Xian was still only a few months old, and shouldn't have any memories, so could it be that the old lady in the Earl's mansion had told him her identity? The night was already late, and a few mournful barks came from the distance, wondering whose master had gotten up at night and touched the door of the wrong house. The blind teenager Wuju's face was cold and indifferent, listening sideways to Fan Xian, finally moving, closing the door of the grocery store behind him and lifting his steps towards the Earl's mansion. Fan Xian felt relieved in his heart and hurried his small steps to follow. Outside the Count's residence, the two men drilled back through the dog hole and stood in the bedroom, watching the still unconscious assassin on the ground. Fan Xian looked at the person on the ground, not knowing whether the other person was dead or alive, inevitably a little nervous, turned to ask, Uncle Five Bamboo, in the past few years, you've been staying at the grocery store not daring to recognize me, why? The blind teenager called Five Bamboo inclined his head again, and after a long time spoke, Little Master, you really surprised me. He was indeed a bit surprised, although he knew that since this child in front of him was a young lady's child, there must be something different, but Five Bamboo really didn't expect that the other party was only 4 years old and appeared to be so mature, and that he was actually able to assassinate Lord Fei, who had come to Kyoto. Let's deal with this person in front of us first. Fan Xian somewhat laboriously turned the assassin on the ground over and removed his masked scarf, revealing the assassin's true face. The assassin's face was thin, already a bit old, and the beard on his jaw was starting to turn white, but for some reason, the white was still mixed with some greenish colors, which looked a bit disgusting. Fan Xian was startled and jumped behind Uncle Wuju, grabbing his sleeve and grunting bitterly, Uncle, this assassin is not selling well. This is Lord Fei, the organizer of the 3rd Division of the Supervisory Court. Five Bamboo slowly crouched down his body and touched that assassin's jaw. The whole world is recognized as one of the 3 people with the most profound use of poison, proficient in the use of poison to defend poison and detoxify poison. Such a powerful character will actually be cut short by you with a piece of porcelain pillow. I don't know if it's because you're too lucky, or it's because he's too unlucky. It was his luck that was too bad. Fan Xian said secretly in his heart, although he was surprised at the big name of this one on the ground, but when he thought of the other party bumping into a monster like himself, who appeared to be a baby but was actually a demon for 2 lifetimes, the other party really didn't have too much luck. Don't touch it with your hands, what if he has poison on him? Fan Xian reminded the blind teenager, Five Bamboo. Five Bamboo didn't stop moving or explain anything, but the vigor made Fan Xian feel that the other party was showing himself that there was no poison in this world that could poison him. Fan Xian squeezed his eyebrows and asked bitterly, Uncle, what about this man? He wasn't of a self-satisfied temperament, it was just that in this world, this blind teenager in front of him was the first person he had ever known, and the only one he dared to trust wholeheartedly. And knowing that the other party was a very powerful and strong person, he was deliberately being cuter and more respectful, with the word uncle going unceasingly out of his mouth. His eyes slipped around and finally landed on that knife, clenching his teeth together, thinking to himself that he could simply stab this Lord Fei to death. Noticing his movements, Five Bamboo stood up and shook his head. Your disposition is too different from Miss. At a young age, you are so ruthless, I don't know who taught you. Learned it myself. Fan Xian did not dare to offend this strong man whom he only dared to trust, and said respectfully, "Nephew knows that uncle has been guarding the grocery store to protect nephew, and also knows that uncle was afraid that my mother's enemies would find their way to me because of uncle's presence, and therefore did not stay in the earl's mansion, and so nephew had to be ruthless himself." Wu Zhu shook his head again and said nothing. Fan Xian knew that this servant master of his mother's was beginning to get suspicious of him, and with a cheeky grin, he asked, "Uncle, what's next?" His meaning was obvious. It was better to let Uncle Five Bamboo do the killing and such things. Unexpectedly, Five Bamboo said indifferently, "Young master, you've hit the wrong person." "Ah? Hitting the wrong person?" Fan Xian was instantly dumbfounded in place, slowly looking down at the bloodied assassin on the ground. But having fought, there's no need to think too much. Five Bamboo said quietly, "Lord Fei is the third house organizer of the supervisory court, and his identity in the Dark Bottom is, to be precise, the subordinate of your father's subordinate. So he should not have come to Tanyu this time to kill you, and if he did come to kill you, then I believe that no matter how capable young master is, he has already died countless times." Only then did it occur to Fan Xian that this assassin on the ground seemed to have previously said that his father had sent him, but Day, growing like a teabag, who dares to believe this kind of old lecher? Fei Jia has been staying in the Kyoto Supervisory Academy's Gezi Institute all these years, an old man in his 50s, although there are some reputations such as a great expert in the use of poison on his body. On the whole, he has already been in a semi-retirement state, and this time, if not for the fact that a powerful person had entrusted him to come to Tanyu for a lesson, and that he didn't have the courage to reject it, he would never have left Kyoto. But to his surprise, the first time he saw his own student, he was hit by the other party with 2 large bags, bleeding half a bowl of blood, and nearly gave away his old life. He looked at the little boy in front of him, and found that the other party was full of innocent and cute, that big eyes flickered, mixed with a hint of fear and shame, such a cute little face, coupled with the identity of the little boy. It made his full of anger have nowhere to be released. Turning his head and seeing a servant-like fellow, he was ready to vent his anger on the other party. "That who? Still not quick enough to untie me? I'm Teacher Fei, who was heavily employed by Lord Earl." Who knew that the servant seemed to be even prouder than him, ignoring him and saying coldly, "In the agreement between your superior and I, it seems that there is no such thing as you coming to be a teacher." Top 5? Fei Suk widened his eyes, which were somewhat cloudy and clipped with brown residual venom, and was startled when he saw the servant's appearance, the 5 great ones. "So it's you." Hearing the assassin call himself Fei Kai after waking up, Fan Xian felt that this matter was truly perplexing.